So I've been researching retirement migration for over a decade now, focusing particularly on older British people in Spain. And recently this has led me to explore the impact of Brexit. So in February this year, I spoke to 25, so I did interviews with 25 British pensioners in the Costa del Sol and asked them about their initial reactions to the referendum and if this changed their future plans in any way. So there are 168,000 British pensioners resident and registered in Spain, but this is people who are registered, and there's many more who maybe are not registered or only spend part of the year in Spain. So who are these people? Brits in Spain, you've got your stereotypes, but older British people are actually quite diverse. What does unite them is their love for Spain and the fact that it enables them to have a better quality of life from the better climate, which can alleviate health problems, and also cheaper living costs and better weather mean people can enjoy a more active and outdoor lifestyle. So there's a strong sense of community among British people in Spain, especially in the sort of costas. Most make many friends, join social clubs and events, and have a much better quality of life and social life than they would in the UK. Now, of course, on the other side of this, there are a growing number of people who have become older, frail, and vulnerable and do need additional care and support. Some people might want to return to the UK in their old age, but actually most people I've spoken to said that they would prefer to stay in Spain. That's where their home is, and they've lived there often for a decade or more, so see Spain as their home. So what does Brexit mean for these people? Mostly it's led to a huge amount of uncertainty. People I've spoken to talked about betrayal, talked about uncertainty, talked about shock, and as I say, they sort of needed to sit down and sort of have big discussions. So what is the biggest worry? Healthcare is the biggest worry. British pensioners currently receive free healthcare through reciprocal arrangements existing between EU countries. This might not be guaranteed post-Brexit. People might need to pay or use private healthcare, which isn't often available to those over 75 or with previous health conditions. Many British people in Spain live on a British state pension and are actually only just surviving. Pensions should remain, and I expect to remain, exportable, but the annual index-linked increment might not. Also, the exchange rate fluctuations and the drop in the value of the pound has a knock-on effect for these people. Brexit also has an impact on identity, especially their identity as European or British citizens. People talked about no longer being able to identify with Britain and felt abandoned by the UK government. What I want to do now is just tell you the story of a gentleman, Ralph, who I met in Spain in February this year. So Ralph is in his 90s. He moved to Spain over 30 years ago, and actually he moved on his doctor's advice. So when he was in his 60s, he developed severe arthritis and other health conditions, and was told moving to a sunny climate would alleviate and sort of help that. So like many others, he chose Spain. Spain is sunny, his pension could go a bit further because it's slightly cheaper to live there. So he moved to Spain and his health showed remarkable improvements and he enjoyed many happy years in Spain. Nearly 30 years later, unfortunately, his wife has died. He's in his 90s, he's become frail and is struggling to cope. He can't walk unaided, for example. So he has some help from social services and also pays for a private carer for a couple of hours a day. He has a British state pension, nothing else, he just rents his apartment, and he's now really struggling to cope. A drop in the value of the pound has meant that his state pension no longer covers his living costs, and actually what he's having to do is cut back on the amount of care that he pays for. Having said that, despite his poor mobility, he does still get out and about on his electric scooter. He goes to coffee mornings hosted by Age Concern, and he also goes to a weekly karaoke night, doesn't drink, just that's where his friends are, and he gets out and he has a sing. He has lots of friends in Spain, and actually no one in the UK anymore. Spain is his home and he doesn't want to return, but is worried that if healthcare doesn't continue, that he might have to. So Ralph and many other British pensioners in Spain are worried that they might have to return to the UK, especially if in the case of, for example, a no-deal or hard Brexit. Most of the people have said that they would be forced to return. Spain is their home, that's where they live, and they don't want to leave. Now, the question, of course, is what happens if hundreds of thousands of elderly British people return to the UK? So as this image by a Brexit campaign group in Spain depicts, how would the NHS cope? So currently, the UK pays around €3,500 to cover the healthcare of every British person living in Spain, every British pensioner living in Spain. But if you actually calculate the actual cost of return of these people, if you take into account the NHS, social care costs, benefits like winter fuel payments, which are no longer exportable, things like pension credit, which undoubtedly many of the people I've spoken to would be entitled to, and housing, not just the financial cost, but also housing stock, the British government would be worse off and services would really be stretched to breaking point. Also, the emotional strain of return would leave people really quite heartbroken, having to leave behind their home and their friends in Spain. So there's a massive range of issues to consider. So I just wanted to end by sharing with you something that I'm doing, a new website, www.supportinspain.info, which I've been developing with the British Consulate in Malaga. This contains information in both English and Spanish on a range of topics that is designed to provide information around Brexit on things like healthcare, returning to the UK, and even things like homelessness. So we launched the website in the Costa del Sol a couple of weeks ago. The idea is to support British people and their families, as well as the charities, doctors, social workers, etc., who are currently struggling to support the growing number of elderly and vulnerable British people in Spain, and also the growing need for information and advice during such times of uncertainty. So just sort of end on a couple of pictures from my launch event. Thank you very much.